Hey folks, welcome back to Tawanya Tells. I'm your host, Tawanya. I'd like to thank you for tuning back in. And I also want to acknowledge my long delay. I do apologize. I am working through learning a lot of this editing and creating videos and content world. I am blessed to have a awesome young person assisting me, my great niece, Brooklyn. And so thank you to her because otherwise, who knows? It might be another month or two before I get this out. Nevertheless, I also want to acknowledge that unfortunately I wasn't able to produce a video where I get to see everyone. I did want to have a video more so like that. This one will definitely be more of images and me talking, but hopefully next time you'll see me along with the guest talking again about some great things going on in Boston's Black community. Um, and so thank you for tuning back in. We're going to move on to the episode, starting with the first map.
Now, in case you haven't noticed, the map that you are currently looking at is the map of the state of Massachusetts. And as I was mentioning, you're also noticing the three Native Indian tribes that once inhabited the state of Massachusetts. And so it only seems appropriate that we start with the very beginning. And that is why at the beginning of each episode, I will either read or just have placed a land acknowledgement because, once again, this is the real beginning with the Native Indians. Now, welcome to Boston. Now, some may wonder, okay, why am I saying welcome to Boston? I already said it's about Boston, but hopefully, some of my fellow Bostonians out there, and I'm not talking about Boston, Massachusetts, understand why I feel the need to specify. So, for me, yes, I am from Boston, Massachusetts. I identify as an African American. That is my ethnicity. Race is black. They are not synonyms. I know we tend to use them as such throughout the world, or at least definitely here in the United States, but they are not synonyms, folks. So, I am a black woman, but I am African American to be exact, and I am from Boston, Massachusetts. And I wanted to specify, should there be other Bostonians out there watching, there is a Boston, Kentucky, we have a Boston, Georgia, and a Boston, Indiana. So, as I said, we have some other Bostonians out there, folks, not just those of us here in Boston, Massachusetts. But once more, I wanted to bring people's attention to looking at the map just to orient yourself with where Boston is located. And I wanted to do that because oftentimes when folks come to Massachusetts to visit, notice I said Massachusetts, they'll say, "Oh, I've been to Boston." And I'll be like, "Oh, where?" And they may say, "Oh, I was over in Worcester." Or I was in Springfield. They may even say they were just next door over in Cambridge. That's not Boston. There is a difference. And so, hopefully, by just even looking at this map, for those of you who are not familiar with Boston, Massachusetts, you're now seeing that Boston, the larger red dot here, and of course, in the larger bold, is right there on the coast of Massachusetts. And so, yes, we're very close to places like Cambridge, and Worcester is 45 minutes away. However, Boston is its own city that is comprised of a bunch of different neighborhoods that make up Boston, Massachusetts. So when you come to visit, be mindful of where you are. Or for those who are coming to visit and you're like, "Oh, well, I was in Boston and there weren't that many black people. There's not that many people of color." First, let's stop and think about where you are, which is why I really wanted to talk a little bit about some of our neighborhoods and where black people predominantly reside in Boston, Massachusetts. But of course, we're everywhere. But numbers as within place may be larger or smaller depending on the neighborhood or which area in Massachusetts you may be visiting. Another thing I wanted to discuss is I recognize that often when folks hear the word Boston, when someone references Boston, 9 times out of 10, it's typically negative. It's usually always about how racist we are, how horrible Boston is for one reason or another, but 9 times out of 10 is always related to race. And I immediately thought of back in Boston 1976. I feel that that's super iconic. Typically, most folks are aware of when busing really hit the scene here and just the racial tension that ensued. And so the image that you're looking at here is of, that time when you have white protesters, you know, attacking black protesters who really wanted to see busing um, come to the city and recognize the value that it could have for both blacks and whites. And so, what you're looking at the image on my left, maybe your right. I don't know how it's going to look. Anyhow, the image of Boston in 1976 is of a white protester attempting to stab then Ted Landsmark, whom I had the honor of working under when I was at the Boston Architectural College. He was the president there. And so here he was being attacked, right? Because whites did not want blacks to integrate their schools, right? We didn't want that. But this isn't something that's specific to Boston. I know folks want to think we are the ones who really wrote the book on racism, but we didn't. Now, do we have our issues? Absolutely. But we have the same issues that we are seeing throughout the nation, same issues around race, inequities when it comes to education, pay, how folks live. I know one of the top complaints that newcomers may have, whether they decide to live here or again, maybe they're coming to visit, is how segregated our neighborhoods can be. Once again, newsflash, it's not specific to Boston. In fact, I've had the privilege of checking out other videos, documentaries that looked at the deep segregation in Chicago. We see this in New York. We see this everywhere. Why? Well, first and foremost, we know that there was this thing called, there was that Jim Crow era. And yeah, we wanted to continue to perpetuate that even after civil rights. We was trying to Whites wanted to figure out how to keep blacks from entering their neighborhoods. And oh, that's how we got to redlining, folks. Once again, not specific to Boston, but certainly we have been perpetrators. And for black folks, we were the victims of it. And so, yes, you have neighborhoods where um, it may be mostly black and mostly people of color. And for the most part, you may feel like, well, that was your choice to live in that neighborhood. And perhaps to an extent, that definitely was your choice. But then also, you still have issues and remnants of redlining or different forms of it in which you're also pushed to certain neighborhoods. So then, therefore, you will have mostly people that look like you. Now, pros and cons of that, to each his own. Nevertheless, what I also want to circle back to thinking about the images is Boston today and the Boston that I am more familiar with and what I experienced, which is very different from what my parents experienced, right? So I'm not ignoring or saying that we haven't or we do not have our issues. We do. What I am saying is that we are not the only ones. What I am saying is that we did not write the book on it. And also, I just want to offer a different narrative because it's a city that I am proud to be from. And it was a city that made me even more proud when we too responded to the murder of George Floyd in the same fashion as we have seen throughout the United States and worldwide. We too flooded the streets. In fact, the image here shows what it looked like, what one of the many um, marches had looked like during that time. And as you can see, It was racially diverse. Big contrast compared to what life was like and what was going on back in the late 70s, and we know the 80s were really tumultuous times. And that is the Boston that I want to talk about. The Boston that where blacks are not in a corner, cowarding because our white peers are somehow towering over us, all menacing. That's not how we're living. We are thriving. We are living. We are expanding. We are existing. And while yes, there are challenges and there will always be challenges, many of us have decided that this is our home and we will continue to stay here to improve it for our children and grandchildren. All right, so let's get down to some numbers. Let's talk about what the racial demographics look like for Boston. Because once again, people will come, they'll say, hey, I was in Boston, but they really wasn't. There was probably someplace else. So when you think about Massachusetts as a whole, it is a very white state. Boston, however, is different. Boston is where you will definitely begin to find more of your racial and ethnic diversity. And so, if that is something that is of concern for you, something that a type of community you would like to live in, and you're relocating here, be it for work, for love, just because you want to try something new, then you may want to consider living in Boston and consider one of the many neighborhoods that we have here. And I'll get to those in a few. But here are the numbers. So we got 52.8% white owned, and then followed by 25.2% black, 0.3% American Indian and Alaska Native, 9.7% Asian, 0.1% Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, and then 19% Hispanic or Latino. Now, I get it. The numbers are still low. You're like, lady, what are you talking about? Those are some small numbers. The numbers, yes, are small, but the feeling is great. And they're small, yes, in comparison to some other major cities. But once again, we're still not somehow just living so terribly. Do we still have a lot to fight for? We do, but we're not living so terribly. And when you think about those numbers being small, again, if that's something that's really important to you, is to the type of community that you're living in, then you may want to pay close attention to the neighborhoods where you choose to live, right? For example, Beacon Hill once was a thriving community for black. If you're in the downtown Boston area, you come to visit, and typically people will be in downtown Boston as they should. I mean, it's amazing, beautiful, especially if you love to be by the water, full of a lot of rich history, amazing restaurants, just entertainment. Definitely a great place to be at, right? Coming in to visit, you want to stay there, do your thing. But when you look around and you're like, hey, I don't see that many people of color. Where the black folks at? Well, we ain't living there anymore. We've moved. So if you want to come and find us, um, we have moved to some other areas throughout Boston. So let's figure out what consists of Boston. What areas or neighborhoods make up the city of Boston? So what we have is neighborhoods such as West Roxbury, Hyde Park, Roslindale, Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, Fenway slash Kenmore, Alston Brighton. We have Back Bay slash Beacon Hill. Just mention it. We ain't there anymore. South End, South Boston. We have Charlestown and East Boston. Now, this map is a little bit old. I think we have it dated here. It says 2011. But these neighborhoods still exist. These are the neighborhoods that make up the city of Boston. Now, within these neighborhoods, where are most of the black people? I've narrowed it down to the top five. Remember, I'm saying top five. Doesn't mean these are the only five neighborhoods where you're going to find black people, but these are the top five that have the largest concentration of black people. So we'll start with Mattapan, riding in at 78% black. Roxbury, specifically zip code 02121, 60% black. Dorchester, 52% black, specifically 02124 for that zip code. Roxbury again makes the list, 02119 at 50%, and Hyde Park at 44%. Now, you may wonder why did I throw out some zip codes for a couple of those neighborhoods, right? So for our neighborhoods that tend to be larger, then we have more zip codes. And so you will definitely find, as again, you may find in other places that, oh, when you leave from this area, from this zip code, or, for sometimes you're maybe just even crossing the street, uh, the demographics can change. Maybe it's white, maybe it's a whole nother racial group. But the point is specifically if you're living within some of those zip codes, you're more likely to be in a community that is predominantly black. And once again, don't forget, black is the race. So that's what I'm speaking of. So that can be inclusive of Caribbean, Black American, African, etc. Black is the race. And then if I want to be more specific, I'll share when I'm being extremely specific about, okay, what group am I speaking of? So, what I also wanted to share as I get ready to wind down is just some key images for those same neighborhoods that I just mentioned. So, if you are from here, hopefully you remember you've driven past, walked past, ran past, however it may be, some of these buildings or some of these statues that we have, or if you're coming to visit, perhaps as you're being driven around, or once again you're exploring on your own, maybe you'll come across these images as well, or and once again some of these iconic buildings. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that with folks. All right, so Mattapan. So with Mattapan being one of the neighborhoods with the largest numbers of black people, if you enter into Mattapan Square, so be it Mattapan Square right on Blue Hill Avenue, like that's the epic center for Mattapan. That's our businesses, that's the hub. You're going to eat, you're going to take care of your business, got your post office, got some law firms. You got a little bit of everything right there in Mattapan Square. Mostly run, or owned by people of color. That's, you just see a lot of vibrancy there. And so right in Mattapan Square, you will also come across this amazing statue known as Rise. And so, this is very powerful piece. It is centered so that whether you're exiting Mattapan Square or entering into Mattapan Square, no matter which direction, it's like right in the center of the intersection, you will see this. Um, so obviously, if you really want to get an up close look at it, you'll definitely, if you're in the vehicle, will need to park someplace and go and take a walk over. Or if you are walking through, you'll be able to stop and ponder and take a look and reflect on your own. And I'll make sure I share the link to this for those who may be interested in learning more. Down in one of my favorites, Roxbury, had tons of family that lived in Roxbury, and I went to school in the Roxbury area for many years. So certainly a little soft spot in my heart. This here is known as the Ferdinand Building. And the Ferdinand Building is located in Roxbury in an area formerly known as Dudley Station. So there's a train station just right on the opposite side of this building. Well, used to be train station. I think I'm showing my age by saying that. It's now just a bus depot. Nevertheless, it has now been changed to Nubian Square because Dudley, it was made known that Dudley used to own slaves, and so Then the community really rallied around changing the name to reflect who the population is there, where we're coming from, etc. And so now it is known as Nubian Square. But the Ferdinand building is still one of the iconic buildings there. I know my parents used to always talk about it. They were so disappointed when it was boarded up for so many years. So I've never seen this building in lights until only but some years ago. The building is going to be the new site for Jazz Urban. Urbane. I had an awesome opportunity to participate in Nubian Nights. They had over a couple weekends. I think this was back here in late March, early April. So the weather was still pretty chilly, but as you can see, even in this image, this is actually a photo taken from one of those nights. They had the jazz musicians, a video playing in the windows down below, because that will be the site of where we'll be able to go and experience some live jazz and just enjoy this space that has been enjoyed and streets walked by so many great people within the city of Boston, be it those who were born here or those who came here. We have Malcolm X, who once lived here in Boston, in Roxbury, and definitely walked these streets. So, this is again another neighborhood that is filled with a lot of rich history, a lot of rich black history. And so, I imagine this will certainly not be the last time I speak about Roxbury. So, again, stay tuned. Um, the next neighborhood image that you're looking at is of Dorchester. Now, the thing with Dorchester is it is huge. Dorchester is our largest neighborhood in Boston, and it has so many different zip codes, which is why when I was doing the racial breakdown as far as where most black people live, I was trying to be very specific with the zip code. Now, I'm sure some of my fellow Bostonians here will be like, hey, I live over in 02125, and we got a lot of black people. I'm sure you do. But I was only targeting the top five. And so by no means am I saying that there are not, a significant concentration of black folks in some of the other communities, but seeing how some of the data that I pulled did center on 02124, that is the reason why I highlighted it. And so part of one of the areas in 02124 is Astronaut Station. And so this is certainly not the Astronaut Station that I grew up seeing. It's definitely been what do you call it? I can't even think of the word. But anyhow, we tore it down and they totally put up a whole new swanky looking Ashmont station. This happened many years ago, folks. This is something that just happened. So I'm sure I sound like I'm making it seem like this. Oh, this just happened a couple of years ago. No, this has been the case now for a little while, but it is just a really nice station now to take a look at. And you have some artwork, some places where folks just kind of want to sit. Maybe you're waiting to meet up with some friends. And nearby, there are several really good restaurants that folks can certainly patronize if you're over in this area. Um, in addition to just other local businesses. So, if you're a cyclist, then you definitely have Ashmount Cycles nearby. You can go and check that out. We have some good neighborhood organizations. I believe Bottom Line is may still be over here. At least one time they was over here. But yes, Ashmont Station. So again, I was just trying to highlight or draw attention to some notable images. So once again, if you just happen to be driving through the city, driving through this specific part of the neighborhood, you may see this and hopefully you'll remember that perhaps you saw it here first. For those of you who are not from Boston. And if you're from Boston, I hope this ain't the first time you've seen it. You have to get out more if it is. Last but not least, a place that I certainly call home, a place where I grew up, Hyde Park, Mass. So the two images here, the one of the building is the municipal building, and so that's typically where a lot of our sports signups and camps and just a lot of, I would say, neighborhood local information, just activities, things that are going on there. In addition to pre-COVID, there certainly was, a little area like a smaller gym for folks who may have not wanted to go to the Y or felt like maybe it was too crowded there, because actually it is really crowded at that YMCA in Hyde Park. I used to be a member, love it, miss it. Yeah. So this is the municipal building. This building's been around for quite some time. So I feel like it's definitely one of those buildings in Hyde Park that you go back years and you take a look. This is a building that you will still see. And then the other building, Greetings from Hyde Park, it was just some newer renovated buildings where this mural you're looking at actually adorns buildings where there are several different businesses. And I'm not sure if this remains the case, but I do know that maybe about 4 years back, all businesses on this row of this, all businesses in this building, there were like four different ones, were all Black owned. And so, like I said, I know one moved. There's a new business in there now, so I'm not sure if that one is Black owned. Sorry, I didn't do my research on that part of it. But nevertheless, I also thought the mural was very catchy. So if you're someone who is in the Hyde Park neighborhood, this is over the municipal building is located in between Cleary and Logan Square. So this is definitely the part of the neighborhood where a lot of local businesses are concentrated. So again, thinking of restaurants, from clothing stores, little boutiques, um, hair salons, barbershops, florists, nail salons, you name it. You can go up and down the little stretch here, specifically from River Street to Fairmont, and there's just quite a bit for folks to engage in. And so, if in fact you make your way to Hyde Park, Massachusetts, part of Boston that folks used to tell me when I was a young girl growing up, oh, that's so far away. If you make your way there, hopefully you'll have an opportunity to drive through this specific part of Hyde Park, stop, enjoy some of our restaurants, enjoy some of the businesses. All right, so that is what I got for you regarding your orientation to Boston, Massachusetts. After today, hopefully, I don't need to make sure I specify them speaking of Boston, Massachusetts, and that folks will know. That's what I'm talking about. And seriously, though, hopefully you are just getting a little taste of what some of those neighborhoods do have to offer. And again, if you're someone who's from here, be it someone who's moved from the city since, you have come across some of those buildings and you're familiar with those neighborhoods, and you can certainly testify to what the communities may be like. And with that being said, I'm about to wrap this up, folks. But guess what? I also want to congratulate my city because Boston has been making some moves. Now, like I said, folks, we know that the typical narrative is about how racist we are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Blah, 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 blah. However, at the end of March, and this is another reason why I'm a little bummed that it took me so long to get another video out. At the end of March, it was a great way to end Women's History Month, especially in Boston, because we had our first female and black mayor sworn in. Case you're not paying attention to the news, Martin Walsh is off DC working with the Biden administration. Therefore, had to appoint a new mayor, and we have Mayor Kim Janey. First female, first black. Super excited for the city. Super excited for Mayor Janey. Even more proud to be a black Bostonian. We are finally catching up to our liberal ideals and our beliefs. And although we haven't always acted on those, oftentimes in theory it sounds good, but in action, sometimes folks are just not ready to do it. And I'm glad, though, that we are finally recognizing that this is what our city needs. We cannot continue to say how liberal we are or how forward we are, and yet we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot by continuing to overlook our communities of color and our women. So congratulations to the city of Boston, making some major moves here. Oh, and we still got excitement coming up because when the mayoral race really kicks off, we have so many people of color that are presently running. So there's a lot to choose from. I will ask that we choose wisely, but we definitely have a lot of people of color to choose from. And I feel even that speaks volumes because it didn't always look that way. We've gotten better, once again, but it didn't always look that way. So as I conclude, thank you all again for listening. Hopefully this wasn't too long, too boring. Hope I didn't ramble too much. If you have ideas, suggestions, comments, you can put them in added to my comment section. You can send me an email at tawanyatells@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on Instagram at Tawanya Tells. So if you're, again, someone, you have some ideas, suggestions, maybe you'd like to collaborate, hit me up. I don't think it'll take me as long to respond to your outreach as it unfortunately took for me to create this video. But thank you again, everyone, for listening, and I hope to not take as long to return. Bye.